The Redmagic 8 Pro has finally made its way to the global market, and before we get into details, let me start off by saying this is the most incredible gaming smartphone on the planet. I'm extremely excited to explain why, so be sure to stick around. The Redmagic 8 Pro is even cheaper than its predecessor, and I have no idea why, since Redmagic have seriously upped their game this time round. There are 4 major improvements here, namely a newly refined design, it's about time, a significantly better main camera sensor which was in much need of an upgrade, a much larger 6000 mAh battery, and most importantly, the display. Words cannot even begin to explain how breathtakingly beautiful it is. Other than those 4 pillars, we also get an upgraded Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipset, Red Core 2 dedicated gaming chip, newly improved 3D vapor chamber cooling system, faster LPDDR5X RAM, next-gen UFS 4.0 storage. Not to mention, this thing is literally a pocket-sized gaming console which allows you to connect things such as a keyboard and mouse, a controller, or even a 120Hz external monitor via an HDMI or DisplayPort. So Redmagic's latest flagship smartphone may very well be the best gaming smartphone ever, according to my standards, but how does it fare up as an everyday flagship smartphone? Let's find out in my full review of the Redmagic 8 Pro. The Redmagic 8 Pro comes in 2 different color variants. You can pick it up in Void, which is the transparent glass version, or you can pick it up in a matte black. The Void version comes with an RGB text at the back, 3 different texts, as well as an RGB fan, where the matte black version, the solid color, only has RGB text. So it still has a fan, it's just not RGB. The design this time around has finally been improved. We have this boxy, rectangular shaped design, which I absolutely adore. It looks like most current 2023 flagships that actually want to stand out. We have branding all around the phone in a gold-like finish, which looks fantastic, and we finally get a hardcover case instead of those squishy jelly cases. Inside the device, you'll find a larger 6000 mAh dual cell battery, as well as 65 watt wired charging, which is similar to last year's 7S Pro, the new TSMC manufactured Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipset, Adreno 740 integrated GPU, Red Core 2 dedicated gaming chip, LPDDR5X RAM, UFS 4.0 storage, a newly improved ICE 11 cooling system, and we also get dual SIM 5G, Wi-Fi 7 this time around, which is pretty insane, Bluetooth 5.3, as well as NFC. The display is protected by Gorilla Glass 5. We have an unspecified glass back, though it is glass, which is nice to see. And we do have aviation grade aluminum frames, which are nice and boxy, very similar to an iPhone aesthetic, but because of the boxy design, kind of like a mix between an iPhone and a Samsung. It is 9.47 millimeters thick and weighs 228 grams, so slightly lower than its predecessor. And the main camera sensor at the back has largely improved over its predecessor, which is now a 50 megapixel ISOCELL GN5 sensor. But unfortunately, the ultra wide and the macro sensors are very much similar to last year's variant. The 8 megapixel ultra wide takes an 8 megapixel ultra wide shot. It actually looks okay with AI. 50 megapixel main looks great. You can bin it down using 4:1 pixel binning to 12.5 megapixels, which looks fantastic. We don't have any optical zoom here. We do have 2 times as well as 5 times, which looks okay in daylight, and 10 times is the max zoom. You can still kind of make out what's happening over here. We also have a macro sensor, that 2 megapixel snapper at the back, which I wouldn't really use that often, but it actually does a more than decent job. And we can take portrait shots, and edge detection is pretty much on point if you ask me. We also have portrait video. 1080p 30 FPS is the cap, and it does not do a good job of edge detection at all. So I would rather stick to 4K 60 FPS, which gives a nice natural depth of field. We also have 1080p 480 FPS main video slow motion, which does actually a very incredible job. We do have 1080p 60 FPS ultra wide video this time around, but once again, you can only use ultra wide video when you're in the pro mode of the camera UI. We also have 4K 60 FPS main video, which is the highest it gets at 60 FPS, that being 4K of course. And we do have 8K, that's the highest resolution, but it is capped at 30 FPS, and stabilization knocks off at 8K, so it's a bit wonky at times. 8K 30 FPS once again is wonky at night, though it does kind of brighten things up. This is a very, very dark street, and it does a more than decent job. Dropping to 4K 30 FPS, since 30 FPS is about the sweet spot, it is a bit jittery because of the stabilization that's kicking in, but it actually brightens things up nicely and keeps quite a lot of the detail. 1080p 30 FPS ultra wide. Once again, you can only use ultra wide video in pro mode and it does not look good, so don't even bother at night. Ultra wide at night has no night mode options, very, very dim lit. And the main sensor was actually a bit disappointing at night with night mode off or on. On does brighten it up, but it doesn't look the freshest. And we do have night mode for 2 times all the way up to 10 times zoom. Night mode on does make a bit of a difference in terms of brightening up each shot, but it loses a ton of detail, especially when at the max zoom, that being 10 times with night mode off or night mode on. Now, of course, we can also take portraits of me at night with night mode off or on, not the portrait mode per se. It doesn't do the best job, and using the actual portrait mode, there's no flash option or night mode option, though it still does a decent job at night, probably better than just taking a regular photo of me. The Redmagic 8 Pro's camera system might be a little bit hidden in the back of this masterpiece of a backplate, but fear not, that main camera sensor has seriously seen some upgrades this time around thanks to that new ISOCELL GN5 sensor, which is largely improved over last year's main camera sensor. Though the ultra wide and macro sensors do their job, they're just not very good. And I am slightly disappointed with the main camera at night. Nevertheless, this is still probably one of the best camera systems that I've ever seen on a gaming smartphone. At the bottom of the device, you'll find a dual SIM 5G tray. Unfortunately, no expandable storage here, though you can get up to 512 gigs of storage, and there is a water resistant seal. We do have a USB 3.1 Type-C port at the bottom, which doubles up as a display port, and alongside that sits the first dual stereo speaker. There's one at the bottom and one in the earpiece, though there is a speaker hole on top, which is not a speaker, but just allows for sound to come through from the earpiece, and this is all paired alongside DTS:X Ultra audio. The headphone jack is here to stay, thank goodness for that, since this is a gaming centric device. On the left side of the device, we have a volume rocker, which is now larger and more flat than before, and we also have an intake air duct above that, which is now been removed from the back plate and placed on the side frame, which I'm very happy about, since that's what Redmagic used to do with their devices. Since they put it on the back, it doesn't quite make sense when the phone is sitting on a flat surface. That of course also shoots into that 20,000 revolutions per minute turbo fan, and the exhaust air vent sits on the opposite side of the intake. We have a power button, which is also larger and more flat, and we do have that game space switch, which still has that wonderful red accent to it. We have the shoulder triggers, which are very similar to last year's, that being 520 Hz touch sampling rate on them and a 7.4 millisecond response time, exactly the same as the 7S Pro, but the 7S Pro did upgrade it from the 7 Pro, so I guess it's okay that they left this the same. They're nice and flat, a bit hard to find though, and we do have that second generation under display selfie camera, which comes in at 16 megapixels, and though it's the exact same sensor that we saw in the 7S Pro, it has seen some improvements in terms of display, but we'll get more on that later. The 16 megapixel selfie looks actually better than I thought thanks to post-processing, and the portrait mode, once again, just like last year, does not work at all. When you click portrait on the camera UI and you take a photo, it might make you look a little bit better even with Beautify disabled, but there's just no form of depth effect whatsoever. You're gonna have to use an external app for that. What's up guys, this is TechNeck recording a 1080p 30 FPS selfie portrait video. Let me know your thoughts on the quality of the bokeh effect. And here is the regular 1080p 30 FPS selfie video on the brand new Redmagic 8 Pro. Let me know your thoughts on the video as well as the audio quality on this under display selfie camera. So we will forgive it for 1080p 30 FPS selfie video, but when shooting video at night, you can see that diamond pixel arrangement coming from the under display selfie camera with the lights in the background, and portrait video doesn't look the best, and night video is just not good all around when it comes to the selfie camera. There's no night mode option when taking a selfie, though you can use the flash, which brightens you up and kind of dims those lights in the background a little bit. Portrait with flash off, the lights kind of obscure my face a bit, and flash on a little bit better, but the problem with the lighting in the background is still an issue. So the selfie camera on this guy is not perfect, but I mean, that's really okay. This phone is about gaming, not necessarily cameras. The back camera system is obviously better than the front, but you are compromising with the selfie camera to get that uninterrupted gaming display that we all love so much, and I cannot wait to get into it. But before we do that, let's power on the device and get to that always on display, which is nice, bright, and vivid. We do have the 7th generation under display optical fingerprint sensor underneath the hood over here, and it works a hell of a lot better than last year, and it does double up as a heart rate monitor, which apparently they have improved as well. We do also have 2D face unlock, which once again has improved over last year. It's a lot quicker, a lot more responsive, and a lot more consistent compared to the 7S Pro. Once again, we have that 2nd generation under display selfie camera, and this time it is changed not based on what it is, but based on how they've put the screen layer over it. It now has 400 pixels per inch to match the actual display, and they have collaborated with a company known as BOE to make sure that the display covering the selfie camera is brighter, more color accurate, and more consistent overall, and you really can, or I guess you could say can't see it at all. We do have a 6.8-inch AMOLED display. It is absolutely breathtaking. Corner to corner, it is very squared off. It is a 20:9 aspect ratio, flat under display camera display, and it has a resolution kind of in between QHD and Full HD with 400 ppi, which is a slight bump up from last year's 387 ppi. It is still 10 bits and supports DCI-P3 100% color gamma rating. There is HDR10 support as well as HLG and wide Vine L1. We also have DC dimming once again, and we have 1300 nits of peak brightness this time around, which is a huge improvement over last year's 600 nits of peak brightness. Not to mention we have tiny bezels, 1.68mm at the top, 2.28 at the bottom, and 1.48 on the sides, which gets us a whopping 93.7% screen to body ratio, a whole percent up over the 7S Pro. This thing is absolutely gorgeous. We also have 60 or 90 or 120 Hz refresh rate, though unfortunately there's no LTPO tech here, so we still stuck to a fixed 120 Hz refresh rate, but it still does a very fluid job. Not to mention we also have the same 480 to 960 Hz single and multi-touch sampling rate, which is great. And we now have Redmagic OS 6 skinned over Android 13. This has got to be the most stock-like Android gaming experience I've ever had on a smartphone. We can move it around and flick between pages, and we can interact with tiny little widgets that are very gaming centric. We also have Google Discover on the left, as well as Google Assistant and Google Play Store, all rooted in out of the box, which is good to see. You can also jump into split screen where you can adjust which app you want larger, which one you want smaller, and we can go ahead and close that up, and we can take YouTube and make it a floating window, which is great too. We can close up that floating window when we're done with it and get to the app drawer, which is nice and nifty. And we also have a great control center, not to mention a load of different personalized settings which you can tweak to your heart's desire. We also have haptic feedback, of course, and though it does the job great for a gaming device, and haptics when you're actually playing games is great, the actual haptics when typing is not quite the best I've tested when compared to other flagships that are not so gaming centric. And we do have those wonderful dual stereo speakers paired up with DTS-X Ultra. So how does it sound when compared to some of the best sounding smartphones around? We'll test out gaming audio a little bit later, but as for now, let's get into some hardware specifications. We do have 16 gigs of LPDDR5X RAM, which is fantastic, though there's no RAM extension here. And we do have that wonderful TSMC made Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 octa-core CPU, which of course has that Adreno 740 built into it, and it does a fantastic job in benchmarks. We'll get to that now, but we do have that cooling fan, of course, that 20,000 revolutions per minute turbo fan. So let's go ahead and give it a listen in auto mode as well as fast cooling mode. And pairing up those fans with the Game Space switch going into Game Space 6 and enabling the Rise performance mode for all the benchmarks we'll be testing, we got an AnTuTu score of 1,306,420 points, which just smashes every other Android out of the park. And getting to Geekbench results, I was a little bit disappointed when I first tested it out, so I decided to test it again. Of course, with Rise performance mode still enabled, the next day I got a very similar score with a slightly increased single core score and a slightly decreased multi-core score. But when I disabled Rise performance mode, specifically in Geekbench, we got the best single core and multi-core score I have ever seen in an Android smartphone. And switching things up from CPU to GPU, testing out Wildlife Extreme, which renders at 4K, we got a score of 3740 with an average FPS of 22.4, which is not the best that I've seen with the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip. But I mean, is there really a big difference between 22.4, 22.5 and 22.6 FPS on average? And now the part that you've all been waiting for, gaming. So flicking that switch on the right side of the device, getting into Game Space 6 with that nice little jingle. Our first thing here is Mora, which is our new mascot from Redmagic. She can aid you in a couple things, I guess you could say.
It's Friday! It's Friday! I can have a holiday tomorrow!
And you can also use an augmented reality camera with her in a 2D kind of state of mind and put anything in the background. You can use her while you're streaming as well if you're into that. It's not kind of my thing, but it might be your thing, and I think it's a pretty cool implementation. Talking about GameSpace 6, of course we have a whole bunch of game-specific settings for specific games. We can adjust operations, we can adjust performance, GPU settings in detail. We can also show different filters, and hopping into Genshin Impact over here, getting to the actual GameSpace overlay, it's very different this time around. We can enable floating windows, close them up. We can change our refresh rate on the fly. We can also show an on-screen overlay to see the FPS on the go. We can do a small window hang-up to show your game while you're doing other things on your device, which is pretty cool. And we do have charge separation so that you can use charger power instead of the actual battery, which is great. Doesn't charge your phone, just uses the actual power. We do have a new thing called Quick Picture Library and Overlay, where you can take a screenshot, add it to your gaming library, and then you can pull it to the side, I guess, if you want to get some cheat sheet codes on a game that you're busy playing. You can also take some notes and help out your friends, share them to your friends and pin them to the side, and you can save them and you can clear them and save them again, and they're all stored over there in a nifty little vault, I guess you could say. We do have a sound equalizer option on the fly, as well as key remapping, where you can place different buttons on the buttons that you usually use and tap in different parts of the screen. And we do have key link macro mode, where you can tap a whole bunch of different things and then tap one button so that it can loop through everything that you just touched, which is good for MMO games, I guess you could say. We do have, of course, those wonderful touch triggers at the top, which are very similar to last year. I like to keep them standard and simple, just single taps on the top left and top right, though you can customize it to your liking. And kickstarting things off with our first game, that being Genshin Impact. Highest possible graphics, max FPS. The game is limited to 60 FPS, so even though the phone can do 120, we will always be capping at 60 because of the game. And we're getting a rock solid 60 FPS on average, which is better than any other device I have ever tested in terms of gaming. Now, getting back to features, we can actually use the USB 3.1 Type-C port at the bottom with a display port or HDMI port cable, plug it into an external monitor, and you get this little gaming hub. This is what truly makes it stand out from other devices out there, using very high graphics and max FPS on Call of Duty Mobile, hooking up our Xbox controller, which is very seamless. Everything about this process is extremely seamless, and killing enemies is very seamless because you're using a controller now with an external display, and you can jump that up all the way to 120 FPS if you have a 120 Hertz rated monitor. It's just one of those things that cannot help but make me smile, considering I love my games and now I can play games with my device hooked up to an external display. Now we can also go ahead and open up Genshin Impact on the device while we're playing Call of Duty Mobile on an external display. And we can play Genshin Impact on our phone screen and Call of Duty in the background on our external screen. This phone can literally run 2 games simultaneously. That is how powerful it is. Now, of course, we can also screen mirror while we're gaming so that you can play on your device and everyone else around you can see what's happening on the TV or the monitor that you're using, and you can use it for regular use as well while screen mirroring. Now, getting back to gaming on the device, Call of Duty Mobile has a cap of 120 FPS when you have Ultra FPS enabled, which we're doing right now, but it reverts to low graphics. So we're sticking to low graphics and the phone is capping at 90. There's only so many phones out there that can hit 120. This would definitely be able to hit 120, but it just has a cap on it. So we're getting a solid 90. But now it's time to go ahead and test out those wonderful dual stereo speakers while gaming. And be sure to check out when we're testing out the speakers in Real Racing 3 so that you can see the crazy FPS that we get in that game.
Enemy contact.
So I guess it's safe to say that the Redmagic 8 Pro packs in more gaming features than any other phone out there. It's literally a pocket-sized console, and no other Android phone comes close to its performance. But this device has so much more going for it other than just gaming. It has a very pleasant Android skin, which is so close to stock it's unreal. Its display has been crafted to perfection, and I can't help but smile every time I use it due to those tiny bezels and uninterrupted experience thanks to such a well-implemented under-display selfie camera. While the selfie camera performance has been improved slightly, it's probably its greatest downfall. But that's the compromise you have to be willing to take for such a gorgeous display. The main camera on the back, however, is streaks better than last year's, and with that massive 6000 mAh battery, you'll have no problems taking photos or videos, or even playing your favorite games all day. Let me know your thoughts on Redmagic's latest masterpiece in the comment section down below. This is TechNick, and I'll catch you in the next one.